everyone, and welcome to Cooking in the Kitchen with LaQuandra and Growing Home. So today we have another quick recipe, and we will be using Swiss chard tomatoes. We have some canned white beans or canola beans or any type of bean that you like. We're gonna make a quick white bean and Swiss chard tomato stew. So for this recipe, we have some fresh tomatoes from the farm, a bunch of Swiss chard. We're gonna use garlic, a little salt, and crushed red pepper. Tiny bit of olive oil as well, but you can also use canned tomatoes if you like, and you can add in other ingredients. So first, of course, we start off with our freshly washed produce, and we're actually going to destem our Swiss chard because the stems tend to be hardier than the leaf itself. So if you're gonna stew them, you would basically destem, chop the stem separately, add it to our water first, and then add the stems last because they cook very fast, very similar to spinach. So we're gonna start our process. I'm just gonna pick that portion off and try to leave the stems because again, they're way hardier and you don't want them to be undercooked. And since this whole plant is edible, we're gonna use all of it. So typically it would look like this, and then you just chop this and set it aside until you get all of them together, and then you just add them to your water. And I always say that Swiss chard to me is like spinach and collard greens having a baby. Because the stems are just like collard greens, and then the leaves put you in the mindset of spinach. So that's my little quick story about Swiss chard. So the second step is we're gonna give our Swiss chard just a rough chop. And you're supposed to boil them for about 8 minutes. So we lightly salted our water ahead of time. So like I said, we're gonna add the stems in first. And let those start to boil, and then we will add our leaves. So I would let my stems boil for about 2 minutes earlier than the greens themselves, and then add the greens on top. So this recipe calls for tomatoes, and again, like I said, if you don't have fresh ones, you can add ones from the can. So I really just like to leave larger pieces of my tomato since I'm gonna cook it in the saucepan. But if you like smaller pieces, it's totally up to you. There's no right or wrong way to slice your tomatoes. So I used 2 tomatoes for this one, but you can use more if you like. If you're a tomato lover, you can definitely add more and add other seasonings, like of course I'm going to do. So you're gonna check the tenderness of the stems, just to check their progress. Almost about another minute or so, and then we can definitely go ahead and add our Swiss chard to our boiling water. Okay, so our stems have boiled for about 2 minutes. So now we're gonna add our Swiss chard that we roughly chopped into our boiling water. And remember, 8 minutes. If you're like me, you can add a little bit of seasoning on top of it ahead of time. It's totally okay. There's really no right or wrong way to season your food. Just be careful with the salt, of course. But just throw that into the boiling water, and we're gonna cover it and let it simmer for about 8 minutes. So we're checking on our Swiss chard, checking its progress. And don't be alarmed if your water changes colors. That's totally normal. It's just from the color of the plant. But we're gonna drain that off anyway, so it won't stay pink for long. So we have about maybe 4 more minutes left of boiling. And then we move to our next step, which is to drain the water off of the Swiss chard. Any excess water, just squeeze it out with your hands if you don't have a colander. And it works the same way. And then The next step is we're gonna heat some olive oil in the pan. We're gonna add our garlic and then add our tomatoes. Today we're using canned beans as well, and I have an additional can of tomatoes just in case. We're gonna add that to the saucepan and heat that up. And a little bit of black pepper. And then I will add in my tomatoes. And again, we season to taste, so if you like a little bit more pepper, you can definitely go a little crazy. I'm gonna let that simmer. And we can also go ahead and add our beans as well and let them simmer together. Don't forget to drain your beans first. So once I open the can, I will rinse the beans and then add them as well. So we already added our tomatoes and they've simmered down. So now we're going to add our other ingredient, which are our white beans. I've already pre-rinsed those. We're just gonna stir them in and let the beans and the tomatoes simmer for about 2 to 3 minutes. And you can definitely layer on some more seasoning if you like. So I think I may add an additional splash or 2 of onion powder and a little garlic powder. And if you have like fresh herbs, like maybe some parsley, you can definitely garnish that on top as well. And you can see the tomatoes are already breaking down and creating a sauce. So again, if you like more sauce, you can add more tomatoes. So about another minute or so, and then we'll add our greens inside. So I'm gonna add the greens now. And then we're just gonna make sure that everything is mixed in pretty well. I'm gonna cover this and let it simmer for about 2 to 3 minutes. And after that, we will be ready to plate and serve. And then peek in our pot and see what our progress is. And it smells great. And you can go ahead and give it a quick taste just to see if you need to add additional seasonings. Because again, we season to taste, but I prefer to use lots of herbs or salt-free seasonings. And if you need salt, sea salt or pink Himalayan salt as well works well too. And then I also use lots of garlic. So. Yes. We are ready to eat. I don't know, but that just felt like a nice hug from your grandmother. Like, that's how warm and hearty and tasty that was. So now we will plate and we can eat. So thank you all for joining us today. And we made a white bean, tomato, and Swiss chard stew.